Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. YouTube.com is where you put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your search browser. Hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment. We're free and available all your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify and Odyssey. Download us there today. Leave us a 5-star review. Roku and Amazon Fire is also where you can find us now. And, of course, follow me at JMCH316. Well, we head down the stretch here as the Atlanta Braves still battling for that division lead with the Mets. Only a handful of games left before we get into playoff baseball. We are joined by my friend Gabe Burns, the feature writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, covers Braves and everything for the AJC. AJC.com is where you can check out all of Gabe's work and follow him on his Twitter page at Gabe Burns AJC. And Gabe, let me start with this. I will go hot take right out of the box. The Major League Baseball should step in right now and tell the Baseball Writers Association of America to give Strider and Harris both the Rookie of the Year award. Because here's the thing. I don't think there's a compelling case as to why one of those guys should finish second in the Rookie of the Year voting.
I agree. I'm glad I'm not voting on it. I mean, seriously, man, because naturally when we have these conversations, we end up tearing down the other guy that you're arguing against, right? We're seeing it like people are tearing down Ohtani to argue for Judge. And I know everyone always goes, oh, well, you don't have to do that. But that's always how this discourse ends up going. I don't see how you can tear down Harris or Strider. I really don't. Harris is obviously just a superb all-star caliber center fielder right out of the gate, 300 hitter. I know nobody cares about average, but still. And Strider, I mean, this guy is an immediate ace. He has been, I mean, he was great in the bullpen. They move him into the rotation, which, as we remember, was a legit conversation. Should they do this? You know, we're looking at that. And now he set the franchise record for strikeouts in a game. He's got 200 Ks. It's just ridiculous what he's been able to do. How big both of these guys have been for this team. You can't say enough about what Harris has done solidifying that spot, what Strider has done in the position that this rotation is in. It's a better position than it's certainly been in recent years. So it's kind of weird that we have to argue against one of these guys, or rather just argue more for another, because both of them have been so invaluable to one of the best teams. And I would hate to pick between them.
Obviously, one of the things that sucked Gabe was Ozzie Albies coming back and then breaking his finger. You know, obviously his regular season is done. They're going to reevaluate him. What do you think the reality of him coming back for the playoffs? One good thing about the playoffs is you can manipulate your roster in each round of the playoffs. So even if, for instance, he's not ready for the divisional round or whatever, whatever wild card, whatever first round is, you can bring him back later on. But what's the reality that he's going to be ready to just come back and play in the playoffs and help this team contribute coming off that injury?
Yeah, I wish I had an answer there. It's also one of those things too where, if Vaughn is playing well, if he helps you win a postseason series, I mean, again, you're going to risk it and bring Ozzie and start him immediately, and not knowing how he's going to look. If there's going to be some rust, you can't afford rust in the postseason, obviously.
Right.
So, if he's going to be a guy off your bench too, there's different ways that you can look at this. But, and look, frankly, they might not be playing deep enough for it to matter. You never know. MLB postseason is weird. We're all expecting them to be in the NLCS again, or, they run into the Dodgers in the NLDS, who knows? But it's such a bummer for Ozzie, a guy that spends, he misses 81 games, spends 3 months coming back, and just like that, you're done again. And I understand they're leaving the door open for the postseason, but there's just so many factors. It's really impossible to say until we get there.
How do we evaluate Matt Olson this year? I mean, on one hand, it's 30 and 100 is what it's going to be. On the other hand, he's had some really funky stretches. This month, obviously, in September, has really been a disaster. I mean, it's been really bad coming down the stretch when you need him to step it up most. On one hand, I'll take 30 and 100. On the other hand, the ups and downs, and he does defensive WAR come out with a negative rating. I mean, granted, it's a minus 0.3. but it's not like he's a 3 defensive WAR rating either this year. How do we evaluate what he's been or done for the Braves this year?
Well, I mean, you summed it up well as far as there's been a lot of good and some disappointing. I think the defensive element of this has been underwhelming. There's no question. Like this, I mean, we knew that this was a really high level defender coming in, and he would be the first to tell you this has not been his best defensive year. There's been quite a few gaffes, but again, like larger sample, you look at the guy's career, it's not really something I'm worried about, but I mean, it's just been a disappointing year from that perspective. Offensively, it's been weird. I mean, look, you said it, it's been brutal. He had 2 hits on Monday. You know, maybe that ends up getting him going a little bit. He needs it. They need to get him rolling before the postseason. But look, I mean, I hate to bring up Freddie again because we've really just hammered that point home, but the reality was that Freddie was just so consistent and just you knew what you were going to get. And everybody knew Olson coming in, it was just not going to be that same level of just steadiness. And that's okay because very few players have that. And Olson is a superb player in his own right. And people wanted to argue he's better than Freddie. Maybe over the long term he is. That's fine. But it's been interesting to kind of watch him just figuring everything out. And look, at the beginning of the year too, I mean, this is a guy who he gets a big contract. He's coming home. There's a lot of factors there. Offensively, I would say it's been fine. Defensively, a little underwhelming. And I'm not worried about him in the slightest. He's fine. He's had a nice year. I am very curious to see the second year that he winds up putting together, but we're nowhere close to that yet.
One guy who I think is going to be interesting to watch with how he's using the playoffs is going to be Williams Contreras, because normally in the play, look, even in the Braves history, you know, even Javi Lopez in his prime, you know, he would get that day where, you know, somebody else would catch Greg Maddux, right? And you get that day off and this, then the other. Playoffs, you don't typically swap your catchers. You don't typically split your catchers up and things like that. And I know they obviously have the DH, but again, we're talking about if Ozzie comes back and you've got all these other guys that you have to think about putting in the mix and stuff like that. How do you think Contreras in the playoffs gets used? Do you think that Snit will split the catching duties, or do you think that Contreras is mostly going to have to DH in the playoffs?
I think he's mostly going to DH, and I think that this is even clearer now that we have Ronald handling himself fine in right field, and we don't have the Grissom Ozzie, you know, log jam that we thought we were going to have. So now you have Grissom. Okay, you have Grissom manning second. You have Acuna in the outfield, and then that frees you up to have Contreras as the DH. And we saw how much Snit, you know, relied on Travis a year ago. So my expectation is you're going to see Travis catching, and you're going to see Contreras as DH, because again, these guys praise Contreras. His improvement defensively, his improvement in game planning, all of that is true, but it's the postseason. No one cares about somebody's development. You're the best. You are at your best when Travis is your catcher, and then you have William as your DH. And by the way, William has had a great year. I'm actually writing about this. It almost feels like he's been underrated.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, and it's weird because he's a backup and he's also an all-star, so he's already kind of just a weird zone we don't see very often. And for a guy to be 24 and doing this, if he was doing this on another team, he would probably get a lot more attention. But being a 24-year-old doing awesome things on this team is, I mean, it's nothing. Here we're used to 21-year-olds doing it. So I will say I hope that maybe it takes him doing something in the postseason, or maybe it's just a more exposure. But I really think he's had an underrated year, and I would really like to see some more appreciation toward that, because the development that he has taken and the job that he's doing has been awesome.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second, because this to me is the big story about the Braves this year too, is the defending World Series champion that brought back most everybody, right? But even losing Freddie, you went out and got an all-star caliber Gold Glove defensive first baseman, right? So it's not like you replaced him with Sid Bream at first base or something, right? But Strider, Harris, Contreras, Kyle Wright. I mean, you think about all the contributions that guys that weren't really contributors last year or weren't even on the roster last year to contribute. That's the amazing part about the Atlanta Braves this year to me is it's not just Ronnie and Riley and these guys. All of the contributions that your rookies and the Contrerases and the Kyle Wrights, that to me is the story that a defending World Series champion has this many young guys coming in and contributing heavily to their success this year.
You know, we talked all through last October about how you need some luck and you need some things to break your way. This year's Braves team, I don't think luck is honestly, it's not the right word because there's a reason that so many young guys continue to do this for this franchise. Clearly they're doing something right in player development. They're doing something right with their
scouting
atmosphere.
and everything. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, from that to just the way Snit handles a clubhouse to the way that guys like Fried and Travis d'Arnaud handle, you know, the way they treat 21-year-olds. There's so much that goes into it. So it's not necessarily luck, but there is an element there. And because they didn't plan on Contreras being their backup catcher this year anyway, because they signed Manny Pena to a nice 2-year deal. He's your backup catcher. So the intention was the intention was not for Strider to be in the rotation. Michael Harris was not supposed to be your center fielder. Vaughn Grissom probably wasn't even supposed to be up here. And if he did, it was going to be a September deal. So credit to these players for putting themselves in this position and producing enough, because we've seen guys, I mean, like how many times do we look at the amount of time we spent talking about a guy like Tukey getting these opportunities and then just falling on his face, and we just have this same conversation over and over again. These guys put themselves into that position and they've played so well and they've sustained it. Kyle Wright to me is I don't think he's the best story because my God, what the rookies are doing is incredible. But for a guy that entering the year, I mean, let's be real. We were all kind of tired of talking about this. It was frustrating. It was frustrating for him. It was frustrating for the Braves. It was frustrating for media and fans that we're still talking. If it was going to be another year like it had been, then he's in that Tukey zone. He's in that zone with these so many of these Bryce Wilson, these guys that just it was clear it's not going to work. He hasn't just popped. I mean, he has been beyond awesome and Mr. Consistency for them. And you look at this rotation, obviously Charlie kind of had the up and down year. You still have Fried's reliability, but when you get Kyle Wright being just so like near a border, like frontline guy, and then you get Strider who looks like an ace. I mean, they've gotten so much to go their way. They're in a really good spot, and that's a testament to these young guys, and it's a testament to the organization as a whole.
Gabe, last thing for you, the Kyle Wright thing, because this is going to be a fascinating discussion. You can make a case, obviously, that Spencer Strider is your second best pitcher and come playoff time should get that spot. I know Snitker likes his veterans. He went with Dallas Keuchel over Mike Soroka, so you figure Charlie Morton gets in there. What's Kyle Wright's role going to be? You're talking about a guy who's going to be a 20-game winner that, let's face it, I mean, as good as it's been, you look at all the options because Fried's going to pitch game one, no doubt about that. But does that mean that Wright gets bumped over Strider and or Morton when it comes to Snitker coming up with this? His role in the playoffs is going to be very interesting.
I mean, Charlie's postseason record and the way they're going to view that, they're going to trust him and everything. Yeah. I'm sorry.
With this manager, by the way, too. I mean, let's be honest. The way Snitker likes those kinds of guys, I don't see how he's going to bump Morton out of the rotation.
I agree. And look, I understand the argument for Strider as a bullpen weapon, and I could totally see it. And believe me, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. At this point, I have a hard time not starting him.
Yeah, I agree. I think their playoff rotation is going to be the first thing to watch. It's going to be fascinating. So check out all of his work at AJC.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Gabe Burns AJC. Gabe is my buddy, and we appreciate it as always, Gabe, man. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me here on the podcast today.
Yeah, sure thing.
Thanks so much for making Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day. Make A to Z with Mark Zinno your second listen every day. Mark back talking all things Atlanta sports. He's free and available on our YouTube page at Locked On Sports Atlanta. Subscribe there today. Also, download us for free on all your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify and Odyssey. Check us out, Amazon Fire, Roku. We're there as well. And follow me at JMCH316. We'll be back with you tomorrow, Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.